Now, at this moment, Democrats are sounding the alarm over exactly how U.S. forces carried out the operation in Venezuela without congressional approval. Let's talk to Clark Neily now, because he's the Senior Vice President for Legal Studies at the Cato Institute. This is a libertarian public policy research group, and he joins us now from Arlington. Clark, your reaction to the footage we just saw as we ask the question of if President Trump has the constitutional authority to do what's already been done.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Two things are true here. I think on the one hand, the president certainly has the authority to execute a lawful warrant, and Maduro and his wife are under indictment in federal court in New York. On the other hand, the manner in which they were captured and brought back to the United States is deeply concerning, because it involved the use of military forces, which has effectively taken the leader of a sovereign nation and removed them from power, and seems to have been, at least in part, an effort to effect regime change. That is an extraordinarily momentous decision, and not one I think that the Constitution leaves to the discretion of the president. That is something that Congress was meant to be involved in.
Now, we're trying to look for historical comparisons to this, and you have to go back to 1990. The U.S. similarly arrested Manuel Noriega. That was Panama's leader. It was also done under the guise of challenging drug trafficking. Does that incident set a precedent for this? And if so, what are some of the lessons that were learned?
I think to some extent it does. And I think, at least as far as the court proceeding, the criminal prosecution of the Maduros, the Noriega precedent will be quite strong. And I think it'll be difficult for them to overcome the arguments that the courts accepted in that case as to why the U.S. had jurisdiction to prosecute Manuel Noriega criminally. And of course, he ended up in prison and died in prison. On the other hand, that doesn't really tell us about the constitutionality of the president's unilateral use of force to effect regime change in Venezuela. I think those are two separate questions. And even though presidents have done this from time to time over the past, so that there is a historical precedent, that doesn't really mean that we've resolved the constitutional question, which I think remains pressing and urgent in this case.
Interesting, because when you say it doesn't resolve the constitutional question, the Constitution is clear. It must have a role in any effort the United States takes in declaring or waging war. Yet Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Congress was not notified specifically because it would have endangered the operation. Is that enough of a justification?
No, I don't think it is. The more closer question here is whether this was an act of war for which Congress has the constitutionally assigned role of declaring and making war. Reasonable people can argue about that. We do have a long history of presidents taking limited unilateral military action, so it may fall into kind of a gray area. But I think it's quite disturbing that the Secretary of State would say that essentially Congress can't be entrusted with information about an impending effort to take down the leader of a foreign country. We have procedures by which there can be limited notification to the heads of the intelligence committees and the leadership of the House and the Senate. And I think that just using this concern about operational security as a blanket excuse for not notifying Congress is kind of a disturbing expresses a disturbing degree of skepticism about the ability of our government to operate according to the constitutionally assigned roles.
Well, Clark Neily, it's wonderful to get your insight on this topic. Our viewers have so many questions about the legality of all of this, and so we appreciate you spending some of your morning with us as we watch a helicopter carrying Venezuela's leader, Nicolás Maduro, and his wife fly over Brooklyn at this moment en route to a noon Eastern hearing in a federal courthouse where the two of them will face a judge for the first time. And of course, our coverage of the operation in Venezuela and the arrest of Nicolás Maduro continues. We have correspondents live at the White House and in New York City covering the next steps for the Trump administration and Nicolás Maduro's arraignment.